Uh, Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Vishal Khandelwal, and this is the 1% podcast. This is a show which is an open ended exploration into the minds of the wisest people around who can help us learn to think, invest, and live each day a little better, even just 1% better. My guest today is Manish Chokhani, one of India's most respected financial market experts. Manish is a director at Enam Holdings and a governing board member at Flame University. A qualified chartered accountant, Manish was one of the youngest MBAs to have graduated from the London Business School. When he's not making decisions about where to invest, or even when he's doing that, you may find him singing, reading, painting, traveling, meditating, or at a Vipassana course practicing the ancient Buddhist meditation technique. Manish is one of the wisest people I know of and the kindest. I experienced his kindness when he offered to help me with his advice while I was working on my book, The Sketchbook of Wisdom, and then readily agreed to write a foreword for it, which I will be grateful for the rest of my life. His insights and advice are a result of life of critical thinking, reading, curiosity, and humility. Studying his ideas and thoughts over the years are a proof of how great things are accomplished through small, persistent steps. We will cover a lot in today's show, and I'm sure this conversation is going to teach me and all its listeners a lot about life than just thinking, learning, and investing. So, with no further delay, let me welcome Manish to the 1% podcast. Thank you, Manish, for agreeing to do the very first episode of the show.
Thank you, Vishal, for very, very generous and kind words. I hope I can live up to the 1% of what you said. And also, thank you for allowing me to be part of a book which I think will outlive both of us because you've really created something outstanding. And also for having me as the first speaker because you need to build up to better speakers as you go along. So it's better I start early and I don't get judged against the others. So thanks very
I'm
much for
starting
having me.
actually. I'm starting on a very high note, so I think the expectations would be set so high. So thank you anyway for doing this very
Thank
first
you.
show of this 1% podcast. So Manisha, I'll start with something which is very really simple. I think close to your heart. Tell me what are you doing now, and what's that thing that really leads you to jump out of bed every morning?
Vishal, it hasn't changed ever. It's just the realization that this is how one is growing, came to me. And I think the easiest way to express it is at a mental level, you want to grow and think about more and more things. And for me, that became over the last 4 or 5 years a lot more about globalization and technology and stuff like that. And at the inner level, so at the outer level, you widen your focus, and at the inner
Hmm.
level, you sharpen your focus to can you go deeper into yourself to really find out your true purpose of life. So it sounds very heavy, but it's what keeps you smiling and excited every day, and being with good people.
Great, great. I think that's good. You mentioned yourself, and what I've learned about you, you were a practitioner of Vipassana, right?
Right.
Which, as little as I understand, is a form of meditation
That's
that
correct.
seeks insight into the true nature of reality.
Sure.
So, what does this practice or meditation in general actually mean to you? What has been the biggest change that this practice and meditation has brought to your life over the past many years?
So, Vishal, at its very core, meditation is basically pure concentration. If I just strip everything out and you try to demystify it, and while someone may get you to meditate on a symbol or someone may meditate on a certain sound, the Vipassana technique is what the Buddha had originally, found, and he basically started focusing on his breath, and through that he could go inside and examine what we call the sanskaras inside our body, like in the bark of a tree, which leaves a memory of the
Hmm.
season. So you could find when it was, a frosty season, when it was a hot season around the bark of the tree. Same way, we have certain memories embedded or certain aspirations embedded within ourselves. And as you go deeper and deeper and deeper into that concentration mode of meditation, you find the whole drama of uh, you're going between the past and the future instead of being in the present, and you gradually realize that everything is basically an impulse which starts, peaks, and goes away, like everything else in nature. And it helps you to then stay a lot more present and grounded into what is going on, and makes you a lot more equanimous as a person. So for me, I think that's been the biggest benefit personally, that in all forms of judgment, in all forms of attitude, in all forms of dealing with people, you just become a lot more objective, a lot more equanimous. That's really the most practical way I can describe this.
Great. It's good you talked about being equanimous, equanimity, right? So but this is a subject that has been like pretty close to me and my heart over the past many years, and I've written a few times
Of
about this,
course.
also in the book, The
Yes,
Sketchbook of
yes, of
Wisdom.
course.
Equanimity, doing meditation, right? Practicing meditation, you look at the world with equanimity and things, and you also believe in the fact that this too shall pass, and everything
That's
actually
right.
passes. How do you maintain that sense of equanimity while investing, for example, or while making decisions when you're surrounded by so much noise, so much hype all around, right? The vagaries of the world and everything. How do you maintain that equanimity and look at the world with that equanimous eyes throughout in all kind of decisions?
I don't know honestly how to answer it because it's part of your common sense, I guess.
Okay.
When but I can understand where you're coming from. It's like us asking Sachin Tendulkar that when you're batting and someone's hurling the ball at 150 miles an hour at you, how do you stay focused and you don't hear the noises in the stadium, you don't feel the weight of expectations of all of India, and of course we are nothing compared to greats like that. But I guess in our each of us in our own way, if you just stay present into what you're doing at that point rather than worrying about, like you said, all the noise all around you, it just works. It becomes part of your nature. So I don't know how to say I'm practicing it actively to stay present, but
Hmm.
I think the practice of meditation, in a sense, just makes it a lot more helpful, I guess, to just stay concentrated all the time.
Right, and this helps you as your role in your role as an investor as well. Like specifically,
In
how have you
anything,
really
in anything,
benefited from?
honestly, I find it even when I'm singing, when you hit that
Okay.
perfect note when you're singing, that is a meditative state as well because you're trying to achieve that. And it
Hmm.
applies in any act. I don't think we compartmentalize life to say, oh, when I'm making an investment decision I will be focused, and I don't know, when I'm with my friends I won't be focused, and so on. I think you just stay in the present.
Great, great, great. Uh, Take us back to your early days as investor, right? I learned from a previous session that you did online that you got into the investment field rather accidentally,
That's right.
right? But what has actually fostered this interest and the love for being an investor or a decision maker over almost the last 30 years?
Well, so my background, I come from a business family. My father used
Hmm.
to run a paper business and then a flexible packaging company and so on, and we weren't doing particularly well. I had studied my whole life. The preparation was to go into industry, and the
Hmm.
thought was industry is what creates wealth, and something is out there in the stock market, and people shuffling money left pocket, right pocket, but doesn't really create anything. The real wealth creation is in industry. So I'd therefore done a CA first to kind of learn the toolkit, and then the MBA to really broaden out the horizons and have a larger canvas to help decision making. But while I was at LBS, I happened to intern in the summer for what was, which today would be called a buyout fund. And I had an
Hmm.
extraordinary mentor over there with whom I learned, and we were actually bidding for a packaging company which he did manage to acquire. And I just found it resonated so much with me that this is going to transform not only this business but the people, and this is something which I intuitively understand and I'm good at, as opposed to coming back and making widgets for the rest of my life and camping outside Hindustan Lever and Nestle and P&G, trying to sell them packaging material for the next 20, 30 years of my life. I was also fortunate after coming back. My father used to always encourage me to have you know a very open mind and very multidisciplinary thinking all through, different friend circle and so on. And he was kind enough to introduce me to actually Manik Bhai through one of his friends, who's Vallabhbhai's elder brother. And it was in the course of a conversation with Vallabhbhai that I think the epiphany hit in the head. And he said, Beta, you are coming from an industrial family. You will find an opportunity. You will gather the managerial resources around it. And then you will exploit that opportunity by having ownership and control. If you can bring that same mindset of an entrepreneur into the investing world, and you look at a business opportunity, here you get an option to look at various management teams which are kind of ready made, and you can have as much ownership of that business as you like. The only trade off in your mind you have to make is you will have ownership but you may not have control. But the flip of it is you can have the benefit of various businesses, not just the one you are doing, and you'll enjoy meeting the best people in the world, and constantly be learning. And that resonated so much that I literally said, I start with you tomorrow. We had no terms, nothing. I just carried his bag around, and I was just happy to learn. And that's how I started, really.
Great. And what has actually fostered this love for 30 years now? Like 30 years you've been an investor, right? So what are the aspects of being an investor as a decision maker that you really love about, that you really look forward
It's
to, like doing day after day?
it's again in a very spiritual sense. We talk of this concept of swadharma, which is your true nature. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
fortunate that I found this true nature early in life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I am actually, in a way, a businessman and a manager, which I was trained for, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
also an investor,
Right.
which is something any businessman in any case has to do, because at the peak of your company, you're basically doing capital allocation decision and so on, and
Mm-hmm.
people
Mm-hmm.
judgment when you're even hiring people or dealing with customers. So it's not
Right.
that different if you think of the way even Warren Buffett would describe it. A
Right.
better businessman is a better investor, and vice versa, and that's really how it comes across. So it just resonated. I think it was playing into my nature, and you tend to think that I'm good at this. I can enjoy doing it, and I enjoy doing it every day, as opposed to the thought of, gosh, I'll have to turn out packaging material for a Lever or a Nestle every day for the rest of my life. Not to
Mm-hmm.
disparage, it's great for someone else. It doesn't work for me. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same way as I may admire a cricketer or a movie star or a politician, but it's not for me. It doesn't resonate with kind of my inner sound, and this
Mm-hmm.
just resonates. And I mean, till today, like you asked me in the beginning, that what do you do every morning? I do the same thing every morning. I try to learn more, and I try to apply more, and I try to become better each day. And that's really what the journey of life is.
Great. You mentioned about spirituality, so I'll come back to that
Sure.
subject. I think you talked with Mr. Chetan Parekh about spirituality investing almost 17 years back, and that again really resonates with me. So I'll come back to that. Uh, what do you know about investing? So sticking with investing for some time before we move on to
Of
life decision
course.
again.
Sure.
And when I'm talking about investing, I'm broadly talking about decision making, about your thinking process, right? So what do you know about the world of investing and human behavior today, that you wish you knew 30 years? Of course, you mentioned that you got wonderful guidance at the early part of your career, right? And got connected with the right kind of people. But what exactly do you wish that you knew 30 years back about investing and human behavior that you did not know then, and you know today?
It's a great question, and it's very tough to answer. What I do know now is that things evolve, and you can't force them to go faster or slower than you wish.
Hmm.
And while I learned a lot of styles of different people with the early books of John Train, who wrote the Money Masters, and I literally read all of them in the course of those next 2 years or 3 years after coming in, because honestly, during my MBA days or CA days, like I said, I had no real insight or knowledge or aptitude for the stock market.
Right.
uh, so I benefited from the, like you say, the shoulder of those giants, and found a
Hmm.
style which works for me. But I also find that also evolves, because if you are following, for example, Benjamin Graham style, you would be out of the markets maybe by 1990. If you
Right.
only follow Warren Buffett, you would probably be out of the market by 2010 or 15, in the context of good business, decent value, because it would not have necessarily applied to, say, the technology world and so on. So
Hmm.
one is that things evolve, and you have to be abreast with evolution. Uh, Two, I did start with being a very, very bottom up person, but I realized the bigger cycles, and as you understand, like everything in nature is a cycle, you have to have a better sense of where the cycles are in the markets, in the economy, in geopolitics. And if you can combine those together with where your business is, that's you're going to be much better. And third, of course, is what you do over time is have better judgment of human beings and psychology, and
Hmm.
what drives human behavior, and how incentives are powerful to human behavior. I don't think, as a youngster who was running screens and buying stocks mathematically, is very, very different from the way I would do it today. So I think those two or three things are what come straight away to the mind.
And you talked about human behavior. So I'm sure, like 30 years back, there were not so many resources on human behavior
Yes.
that you could actually read and learn from, right?
Yeah, that's
So
right.
being in the market, seeing things, actually seeing, witnessing human behavior and your own behavior, I think were the biggest
That's right.
training grounds for you, right?
And actually,
Uh, uh,
you said it right. Actually, the biggest is me myself as the investor.
mhm,
I need to be a lot less, cocky or aggressive or superficial, and the investment has to resonate with you also, right?
mhm,
If I'm not buying something which resonates with me, it may be a hundred bagger, but I'm not going to be holding it for long. So what
mhm.
someone Buffett very well described as the circle of competence, I would also define something called an investment which is in resonance with your swadharma.
Okay.
For example, uh, let's just take an example. If I were to buy, say, a steel stock, and incidentally they're doing very well today, and it doesn't resonate with my basic aptitude or understanding, I am not going to make the 10 or the 100x over there. As
Mhm,
opposed to an investment which, for example, we just take the tech world, which happens to be a better metaphor, starting from the old days of Infosys for kind of knowledge work going in. I like the business. I might want to own it forever. If I go in thinking this is closer to my nature, I'm likely to make the investment and hold it and benefit from it, as opposed to something which I'm buying already thinking when do I exit this. If you kind of understand what I mean. So I'm
yeah.
really the fourth part of that equation which I described to you.
Right, right, right. And we all talk about power compounding, and the compounding takes time to really, right, show the benefits for people, right? In investing, life, habit building, everything, right?
Yes.
In your journey for 30 years, when was that period? If you could go back and recollect where that curve actually shot up, or that moment, or those moments, or those years, maybe, where that curve actually started shooting up for you, right? Your biggest period of learning, or something changed in your life as an investor that really helped you really move up the curve into a different orbit altogether.
Well, when you're talking, you always obviously think of your starting point. And I remember the starting points came very early in 1991, which is just before the Harshad Mehta scam when things were going crazy. And remember, I'm a newcomer into the markets. And I'm reading like crazy, and none of this makes sense. But fortunately, I'm with people who are, value investors, and you could be out of, the entire market before the whole thing blew up. And then I again was fortunate that to be having the patience to just sit on cash for an entire year until that 1993 bottom was made, and you just felt like, my gosh, I wish I had 10 times the money to go back and buy things over here. So that period of learning was very intensely packed together, and I think
Mm-hmm.
in that sense, bull market tops are great teachers because they test your emotions along with whatever you have read, and only when it comes together it kind of makes you survive for the next cycle. And similarly, in the 2000, when everything is going great in the world, Infosys and Wipro and all are trading at multiple lakh crores, they can do whatever they want. Uh, Even in that period, to know that this merger of Time Warner with AOL at $160 billion is just something going crazy, and this is enough, and I don't need to be here. Uh, it's periods like that which kind of change your thinking completely. Uh, so I would say one is that early learning period. I would also come back to something very recent in 2016, 2015. My son was working in the US, and I had the chance to go and live there for a while. And I had the chance to attend a program at Singularity University where I got exposed while I'd read about a lot of technology, getting exposed to all of it and seeing it present and here and now. It's like, my God, like a switch goes off in your head that a lot of the things which we're investing in and investing is about terminal value, which what you're buying for. A lot of these terminal values are not going to be around 10 years from now. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, your mind has to now think a lot differently than what you have thought about other businesses, or this person is so smart that he will kind of morph his business and grow out of it and so on. So, I mean, at both ends, it's constant learning, but there were 2 3 periods like that which were very very sharp in terms
Mm-hmm.
of learning. Also, a profound change for me happened with I think I did my first Vipassana program with Guruji in the year 2000, just ahead of the crisis, and that kind of helped to, in a sense, cope with what I think was the madness going around. And again, fortunately, 2007 top. Also, I kind of remember distinctly that something is not right. It's not in sync with what's going on in the world. So uh, that's really what comes to me top of mind.
Great. Singularity University you mentioned, right?
Yes.
And you did, I think, a 1 year course over
No,
there.
no, it was just actually a very intense week program with Peter
Oh, that's a
Diamandis,
weak
Ray
problem.
Kurzweil, and
Okay.
everything. And if
Okay.
everyone could go for it,
Hmm.
I've spoken about it very often. I've gone to a lot of friends in fund houses, made presentations to them also to just share that learning,
Yeah.
because we as India, in a sense, are falling behind. And I feel the way we missed the invention of the steam engine and the invention of gunpowder, and we just lost out. While we are a very tech savvy country, we still tend to be just the service providers to a lot of this tech, or the
Hmm.
cut copy paste of the Amazon will get copied and made into a Flipkart here, or Uber will get copied as Ola here. But there's very few companies yet, and nothing to do against anyone or any sector, but we are not really at the forefront of what is going to change the world in the next 10 years, whether it's the whole field of AI, whether it's the whole field of robotics, whether it's the whole field of what's happening now with genomics and biology. uh, all of this is going to transform the world we are living in. And if we are just service providers to these people, we end up like Mexico is to America, rather than being at the vanguard of what is coming. And with
Hmm.
a country which has such deep scientific base and knowledge, and also now abundance of capital, I just hope over the next 5 years we find lot many more new companies, businesses, entrepreneurs, society, ecosystem coming together. Which the beginnings are there, but we have a lot of catching up to do with America, with China, with Korea. Where we will fall behind. We really need to accelerate.
And to actually really match up, even to catch up with those kind of standards, you need an exponential mindset, right? So
Absolutely.
we never learn about first thing, we never practice or really look beyond a few years when it comes to compounding, which is an
That's right.
exponential equation. So in a world which is changing so fast, right? And you've learned in that intense program at Singularity University how the world is changing in terms of technology, AI, and everything, right? uh, what would be an advice to someone starting out, or a youngster, or a 20-year-old who just getting into a job or work, in terms of learning or building that exponential mindset, so that they are not replaced by machines? We are seeing so many jobs being replaced by machines these days, and this space, I think, is going to increase only
Yeah.
in the future, right? So how do you, what advice would you give to someone to really create that kind of a mindset, or a work ethic, or a learning pattern, to really uh, get over that real danger? Of course, nothing is foolproof or safe, but your advice would really help over here.
So, from a youngster perspective, the first thing, and which is what my father also told me, is first uh, have really good sangat. You must have a great circle of friends, influencers, people who shape you and your personality, and don't ever compromise on that. Don't ever compromise on ethics and integrity. So that's number one. Number two, which is something I carried forward with my own son when the time came, was that look, at least till you're about 30, nobody worries if you have tried stuff and you failed. After that, you start become a bit conscious about, oh, he's not doing well, so on and so forth. So till 30, you should be really experimenting, and you should be experimenting for something where the upside, very much like when we say in our investing world, where the upside can be unlimited and the downside is not too much, so we can bounce back from it. And it applies to investments, but more so it applies to your life. Third, like we say in investing, you must find a good person who's leading that business. For a youngster, you find that mentor at that young age who's going to shape your personality and your work ethic and all of that. Whereas most people, unfortunately, end up chasing, brand companies, and this is where my career will be steady, or I will buy this blue chip and so on. So the same analogy applies there. And I remember my father telling me when I was starting out that, Vita, if you want a really good home, you must go to an office which you will help to make great. But if you choose to go
Mhm.
to a really great office, your home is
Mhm.
never really going to be that great. I mean, that metaphor being, you have to be part of creating success of something, not becoming, a passenger in someone else's, successful bandwagon, or just joining a successful team. So those,
Mhm.
from a life perspective, I think are things I would think about. But from
Mhm.
a learning perspective, certainly for any Indian who's growing up now, we cannot be thinking of India as the economy. We have to think of the world as the economy, We have to think in terms of, if again our destiny is, India will be third largest economy in the next 10 years. It's not going to happen by doing the things which got us here. It has to be different stuff. And we cannot be like frogs in the well, thinking about how much market share will I have in India, how can I win against so and so player who's been there for the last 3 or 4 years. You have to be thinking blue ocean, as if you were born in, let's say, Singapore or Hong Kong. You would have been investing all over the world. What happens in any part of the world, and it's come home even more now in COVID times, where some man eats something wrong in China and the whole world is down for 2 years. So if you don't realize the interconnectedness of the world and how a business in America or in Korea or in Taiwan can come and impact you over here and shape your investing attitude and your outlook to whether you become a manager or an entrepreneur also in the same manner, you're doing
Mm-hmm.
yourself a disservice. And if you
Mm-hmm.
project out, and I had this great notion about myself that I will be one of the leaders in whatever field I choose to. But if you then start thinking 20 years out, in 2040, where are you as a current 20-year-old? What would you have done which would have been in sync with what's happening in the world, in sync with what's happening in the country? You have to be part of that tidal wave. So I'll just pause at that, because
Mm-hmm.
I could go on, and my son is going to be like, Dad, I get enough of this. So
Right. COVID, we're still going through that pandemic, right? And situation has improved, but nobody has any clue about how things are going to pan out, right? What has changed for you in a post-COVID world from the pre-COVID world? As you look at life or decision making, what are the things that come on top of mind that have really changed in the last 2 years for you due to the virus
so
or the side effects, after effects of it?
so well, couple of things, and I'm sure you had other speakers who've come and spoken about this as well. That at the very first time, COVID, in a sense, got us to stress test everything, whether
Mm-hmm.
it was our relationships with people, whether it was the
Mm-hmm.
processes of how we were conducting, or even if I have to buy and sell my stock, or the way I have to
Mm-hmm.
run my factory. All that comes. How do I get my students back into flame? How do the professors have to conduct classes with them? All of it comes into stark kind of focus. So, A, you've got a stress test done. Number two, the world which post 1990 had become very globalized and very much what we call a optimized just-in-time world, where you have supply chains which are working on just one day delivery, so that you can have optimized working capital cycles and ROI and all of that. You realize that there is value to resilience, which in the
Mm-hmm.
investing world, what we call margin of safety,
Mm-hmm.
in the kind of real world, was, I guess, over optimized. You
Mm-hmm.
were optimizing your supply chains, you were optimizing balance sheet, that I want so much debt equity, and you realize, gosh, we never thought we could have 6 months without any revenue, and I still have to
Mm-hmm.
pay my salaries, and I still have to pay my interest, and I still have
Right.
to repay the loan. So the value of having that resilience, which we guys always talk about, margin of safety, keep 20% cash available, blah blah, whatever. I think that also came into stark focus. Third
Mm-hmm.
is, I guess, the acceleration of trends. So a lot of the things uh, one was expecting, for example, on technology, have indeed come to pass. Now
Mm-hmm.
imagine a world, if you didn't have Wi-Fi, you didn't have 4G, you didn't have Zoom. Uh, how would this world have carried on? And if you did not have the investments that people had already made in biologic research, we would
Mm-hmm.
probably not have even seen the vaccine today. And with the advances being made in gene therapy and so on. Fourth,
Mm-hmm.
of course, is the stark focus, that purpose of life, which most people, I guess, look as money, fame, power, in a way, goes out of everyone's head. And you realize family matters, health matters, air matters, space matters. All the things which were free matter a lot. And your
That's true.
relationships matter the most. Laughter matters the most. And it's inner peace eventually, right? That, are you at peace with what is happening, with the people around you, with the way you have shaped your life and lived your life? And I guess for most people, it would have been a period of great satisfaction to know that you know our life is carrying on and we're in good shape, family is good, health is good, and so on. While you hear such horror stories of what is going on, you can only contribute in very, very small ways, but it just fills you with even more gratitude towards what the kind of universe has given you. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's really the summary of COVID in a sense for us.
Right, right, right. So I was recently reading J. Krishnamurti, and one lesson that really came out on top was he mentioned something about real learning, and he said that real learning is not really a mere cultivation of memory or the accumulation of knowledge. It
Mhm.
is the capacity to think clearly and sanely without illusions, without any prior beliefs and ideals. Right. So you have been a learner over the past many years, thinker, decision maker. We've talked about that, right? But take us through your journey of learning yourself and the process of deep thinking that you've practiced while building institutions, while doing research, while analyzing businesses, while investing, while being an entrepreneur. Take us through your learning journey of learning and deep thinking, which is actually so much required in the kind of work that we all do as decision makers.
Okay, well, it's a great question and it's a deep question. So let me pause and think for a minute.
Yeah, sure.
And let me start first with is if you have the right people around you, and I think even you wrote it very well in your book, that the biggest decision you make in your life is your life partner.
Hmm.
And the people then, of course, follow that. Who do you work with? So
Right.
if you get the right people around you, I think that is the first thing to kind of think about.
Right.
Secondly, I am a big believer of nature cycles, life cycles, and
Hmm.
I think I've mentioned also somewhere that if you see evolution of how mankind had that Cambrian explosion when our brains really grew, we could stand upright and we kind of broke out from the other amphibians in the world and became different people. The same thing applies to countries. The same thing applies to sectors. So 200 years ago, it was agriculture, then industry, then IT, and going forward to deep tech and so on. Uh, are you in sync with what's happening there in our life cycle? We talk in our Hinduism of the stages of life. That are you in sync with
Hmm.
what you call stage one was learning, stage two is the householder's period, stage three is the giving back period, and stage four is your sannyas ashram. So can are you in sync with that? So if you are in really in sync with what's going on, uh, and you're curious, open-minded, which is a state of mind, you're optimistic, you're happy, it's a better way to lead life. So I think that nature and personality are the first things I would talk of rather than the harder skills that you could learn, in this field in engineering or in psychology and so on and so forth. So I do think what we get shaped as people at home with the company we have and our attitudes, I
Hmm.
think are number one. Number two, people in NM will all laugh when I say this. I learned very early in life, and we coined a phrase in NM called target, plan, execute, and review. As in,
Hmm.
if you don't know what you're shooting for, and for that also you have to be in alignment with what the trends are. How will you hit the goal? It's like trying to shoot a bow and arrow, but you don't know where the bullseye is. So you got to know where you're heading. Then, if you're trying to do that, what's your plan to kind of get there? Uh, because the biggest mistakes we make is we just embark without thought, and then we have to rework and keep reworking and so on, and we lose time and waste a lot of effort doing that. So if you can plan it in terms of what you need to do, put the resources, put the framework around it, you're likely to be far more successful than others. Then you actually execute to that plan. But the fourth link, which is the most essential, is then you review that plan, which is what we would call as the introspection period, to see what worked, what didn't work, how do I course alter. And this applies, like we said, in our life as well, that when you have to do what you're doing but also have an introspection period. So you
Hmm.
have a framework for your life, where I want to be in 10, 20 years. I'm working towards that plan, I'm executing it, then I'm also introspecting of where am I going. And we are evolving, so the plans would change. But as long as you're kind of going in a direction which you don't look back 20 years later and say, gosh, why did I do what I did? You
Hmm.
don't want to live a life of regrets. Or
Right.
so it applies in every field. The third is what we call margin of safety or resilience, or what Talib has also described as anti-fragile. You need that buffer. We are not here to optimize everything, make the last buck in the world, exploit the last resource in the world. So I would think of that as kind of third, it's a kind of mental construct that I always have in my head.
Hmm.
I would think of what's no go. So what not to do is more important than what you want to do. because then it narrows it down and sharpens your focus as well. And like even Charlie Munger said it very well, that for decision making, you must always invert. If you know
Yeah.
where you're going to go and die, you don't go in that direction at all. So that,
Hmm.
whether in a positive way you call it circle of competence, in a more sort of negative clarity way you could call it a no-go area for yourself. That would be kind of fourth. The fifth I would think of would be actually discipline, to stick to what you've put down. And most mistakes we make is when we break our own defined parameters of discipline. I myself have been guilty of it very often, where I have this screener where I have red, yellow, green valuation grids, and there are times when I think, oh, what does the mathematics know, and computers can't do it. So sticking to that discipline and not getting over emotional at those critical points, uh, and certainly things like Vipassana and meditation will help to get that emotion equation kind of right. So that would be kind of fifth. Uh, then, of course, in investing, there are lots, right? You don't double count that because it's a good company, a good management, a good this thing, therefore this price. So if everyone just went and bought the best management, best business, and didn't worry about price, we didn't need a stock market then. So don't double count, and equally on the way
Right.
down when things are going bad.
Hmm.
So there's lots of stuff like that, but I think if you get the big five blocks kind of sorted out, you can approach
Right.
most things in a very practical manner.
Right. Inversion is, I think, one of the most critical elements, as you mentioned, as a decision maker, and one of the most difficult to really practice as well, because we don't really look at life from an inverted point of view. I remember Charlie Munger in Poor Charlie's Almanac. There's a speech where he talked about how to be miserable in life. Right. He gave a lecture, and he talked about being unreliable and looking at envy and all those kind of things as
Mhm.
how do you be miserable, and if you don't do those things, you actually be happy in life. What are your what is your prescription of being miserable in life as an invested decision
I
maker?
think
Maybe two or three things that people should not be doing that can kill them as
it,
decision makers.
so. Vishal, it's like I said, there is a certain swadharma we are all born with,
Yeah.
right? There, you have to be true to your nature. This is not a prescriptive thing. That what is a no go or a miserable thing for me may be
Mm-hmm.
joyful for someone else. So I'm very scared to say this in kind of a platform like this. I would be happier
Okay.
if we were doing a one-on-one. Like
Sure.
let me say illustratively, if you see the evolution of the villain in the Hindi movie,
Uh-huh.
do you see a pattern over there? Like
Mm-hmm.
50 years ago, it was that the very kind of patriarchal father who would not allow the children to do what they wanted. Then it
Right.
became the smuggler, and there was that famous Shetty who was, smuggling in whiskey and gold and all from Middle East or wherever. Then it became, the politician or the gunda or whatever. It's telling you what society doesn't like. But
Okay.
having said that, do I have the deepest admiration for people who are in public service, who are in politics, who are doing selfless work? Like I often wonder, like both are prime minister, the current one and the previous one. You wonder why are these guys taking so much stress? Taking the stress of the nation, even when they're doing their best, they're getting abused. Why are they doing it? But that is something which is in kind of rhyme with their own inner kind of character and scorecard, and it works for them. So I don't want to go down that path of saying this is what is miserable and this is what is great. What's worked for me is what I've done, and by kind of counter to that, what's not worked for me is kind of easy to infer. Let me just leave it at that.
Okay, so let me frame this question some other way, in a different manner to get an answer from you, in a way. Maybe an advice for, again, a lot of youngsters are going to listen to this. A lot of
Right.
people getting into life are actually going to listen to this. So maybe an advice for a youngster in terms of what things he or she should not be doing broadly. Of course, we all need to find, as you mentioned, as swadharma, right? And experience life as it is, rather than examining everything that comes in front of us.
Right.
But as a doctor prescribing, okay, these are the medicines, three medicines that you should not be taking to get ill, right? To avoid getting ill, right? So what are those three bigger, broader things that can lead people to
So
kill themselves
i'm,
financially, maybe,
I'm going to
or in
say
decision making?
maybe kind of non-financial kind of way, and maybe
Okay.
it's provocative. I would
Okay.
say we are all brought up in human life to basically chase money, fame, power, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
when you do achieve it, you realize, what am I going to do with this? This is not
Uh-huh.
why I was here.
Uh-huh.
And I know it's easy, and a youngster will say it's easy for him to say because he's had his, small share of all the three.
Uh-huh.
But that's not the purpose of life.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go crazy, going with more, 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 and it never ends. So I would say two things if you can keep in your head: what is enough for you, what resonates with you, have that in mind,
Mm-hmm.
because you can make $100 billion, right? You can be the most famous person in the world. You could be the most powerful person in the world, but does it really matter? And what really matters, if you figure out in life eventually, will be
Mm-hmm.
your relationships and the one person or the three persons who are going to miss you when you're not there. If
Mm-hmm.
I put it in a very morbid way, and when you're young, you won't think about all this.
Yeah.
And by all means, you must get that in that second phase of life, which is the householder period. You must get your share of money, fame, power. Otherwise, you can't just go into sannyas ashram at the age of 20. So you do that, but have a sense of what is my goal and what is enough. Because, and again, you may laugh at me for saying this. In the stock market, we have this notion of compounding,
Mm-hmm.
and it's great. We must invest in compounding companies, but we were not born to just keep compounding till the age of 90.
Right.
Nature is not linear. Nature is cyclical, and there is something else you are meant to do at a certain point in your life, and you must have a roadmap of where your life is going to take you. You don't want to be.
Uh-huh.
I don't know who said it, Andrew Carnegie or Rockefeller or someone, that if you're born poor, it's okay, but if you die rich, it's a very sad thing.
That's
You
right.
you have to be doing something constructive with it, and also have this notion of stress.
Mm-hmm.
Most problems we have in life, whether it is financial, where I've leveraged too much to optimize, whether I'm taking more work than I can handle, whether I'm eating a lot more and therefore causing inflammation in my body. What is the stress? When we are overloading ourselves and not having a margin of safety. So if you start thinking of that in different dimensions of your life, like in your personal life, is there a balance of work, fun, family, all of that? In your business, is there a notion of balance where, while I won't say leverage is bad in a business, but as an investor, you have no business to be leveraged. And even in a business, there is something in moderation is okay. But if you go crazy, you're going to be, kind of dead. Same thing, in any other format, whether it's your business, whether it's your investing, whether it's your lifestyle, whether it's your health, you want to work at 80%, not at 120, because that's what's going to give you longevity and what we call anti-fragility. And like you say, the first rule of the game, if you want to finish first, is first you have to finish the game. So
Right.
if you just stay kind of in these kind of broad parameters, I think it will last you in good stead. And your word has to be your kind of honor.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you've committed, if people can rely on you, that really is the only wealth you have.
Right.
If I lose everything tomorrow, but if I have enough goodwill and if people have confidence in me, I can recreate life, you know, in a matter of months, if not, weeks. And
Uh-huh.
that goodwill is something which can never be measured. So let's try and build that constantly every day.
Right. And again, goodwill compounds. If I were to
That's
continue
it.
about compounding, goodwill
It does.
compounds. Again, it's a
It does.
back-ended, right? You
Yes.
do good now,
Sure.
good is going to come,
Sure.
as the law of
Sure.
karma says. I'm sure. Uh, uh, Going on to Charlie Munger and multidisciplinary thinking, you have been thinking and you've been talking about learning about various disciplines in your talks with students, and you've talked in the markets as well. Uh, your biggest ideas, your three biggest ideas that people or mental models that really have helped you in your life over the past many years.
Um, I'm not as big a thinker as Charlie Munger, so let me start with that. But the notion he puts out, and I think if we do one service to people, is to put up his fabulous lecture at USC where he discusses this concept of multidisciplinary thinking.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the best education anyone can have, and I can only kind of echo things which were said there. From my own personal perspective, the two or three smaller things which I find have really helped me is: number one, we talk of a lot of the formal fields of education, which also Mr. Munger has done. I found for me to have the philosophical bent of life, of finding the purpose of life and the swadharma, and being in sync with nature. It's very
Hmm.
removed from what you would learn in a school or a college, and it doesn't come easily. It's a combination of, like, you may get it as a moment of insight when you're reading Upanishads or Gita or Dhammapada, whatever you like to follow. But if you get to that notion of my true nature and where I stand in relation to things, and how can I be in sync with that, I think a lot of things open up itself. And if you get that basic toolkit right of being in tune with yourself and the universe, then of course all the standard things which apply, that I must know the basics of language, I must know the basics of math, I must know the basics of physics, I must know the basics of what is computer science, I must know the basics of evolution, some lessons from history from the past, I must know psychology deeply. So all those of course apply. But if
Hmm.
you get that alignment and syncage between your true nature and the universe, I think for me that's been kind of the biggest kind of multidisciplinary thought, in a sense, I could say. The
Hmm.
second learning for me has always been about the world, and everything is cyclical. There is no linearity in nature. And we always want to perpetuate, we want to become immortal, we want our companies to become bigger, we want to just constantly be compounding. It's against nature. I don't think it happens. The richest guy of 100 years ago is not going to be the richest guy. So why are you killing yourself doing that? The most famous guy is not going to remain the most famous guy, and so on. So try to get kind of united with what is really the infinite purpose of life, which is to really discover your true self. And three is, evolution is not going to get rushed. There are phases where it becomes exponential, but something takes time. Like a baby takes 9 months to produce. Whatever we do to
Hmm.
science, I hope we don't start producing babies in a week. It has to have its time to maturity. And there is a time for someone to grow. There will be a time for everyone to grow. Let's not try to rush it and enjoy life. Every day is to
Hmm.
enjoy. I think it was said very nicely in your book as well, also, as seize the day. If you are enjoying every day, what's your rush? The purpose of life is not the goal. The purpose of life is, in a sense, to have the journey and be improving. And in a sense, your soul has come here to, like in a classroom where you're learning and you're getting better and better and better each day. And that's at least how I approach it. I hope that helps.
No, I think it helps. I think it also takes me back to what Warren Buffett talked about when a child, I think, I asked him a question about delayed gratification. He said you should delay gratification, but not everything.
Yes, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
You need to strike a balance between living in the present and also taking care of the future
Yeah.
in
Well,
some way. I
Buddha
think so.
says it's
Not
the middle path, right? There
the
are no
middle
extremes.
path, right?
And like everything, it comes, it peaks, and it goes.
Right.
So if you just keep saying I'll hold it, and when I'm 80 I'll enjoy and I'll have my first piece of cake at that age, I mean, what's the point? But
That's
equally, if
right.
you're eating a cake every day, you won't get to 80. So you have to be somewhere okay in the middle.
That's right. That's right. You talked about impermanence. If I remember, you use the word like impermanent nature of things, right? And you've also talked about in the past about detachment, being detached as an investor and decision maker, and especially given the nature of that the nature of everything is impermanence, and we control less than what we
Everything,
think, right?
absolutely.
How does one actually practice, or how do you actually practice detachment while living in a material world, right? And especially while pursuing wealth creation. Of course, we talked about that not everything should be like saved and compounded. You need to enjoy the present as well. But how do we actually stay detached while living in a material world and pursuing wealth creation, which is material?
So I think the first thing is, in a sense, if you remove the pressure of saying I'm pursuing wealth creation, whatever you pursue will not happen. If you're
Right.
enjoying it, actually, I invest because it's like a thesis which I have, which if it works out, I feel happy.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think the zeros, if they come, and even when we lose, there is a learning, and I treat it
Mm-hmm.
as a game. And the metaphor I can give you is to use it easily as a cricketer. If, again, using the famous Tendulkar example, if he starts out thinking, I got to reach, 100 centuries, he'll never score a century, because each
Mm-hmm.
ball he's facing, he's going to be thinking of that 100 centuries. You got to play
Mm-hmm.
each ball on merit.
Mm-hmm.
Same way, what is the pitch on which you're playing? Is it a seaming wicket in England? Is it a spinning track in Chennai? Is it a what do you call the muddy pitch of Sri Lanka? You have to be playing according to that, right? And that's the
Right.
investing season or whatever we talk about. And you have to have in a sense of detachment that in in this game I'm playing, what is the role that I'm supposed to be playing? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I hope it makes sense from an investing perspective as well. That if
Right.
you start playing a T20 game in a test match, it's not going to work.
Right.
So that sense of objectivity in a way is what I'm trying to explain. That if you can be kind of one step back and think about, again, like I said, that target, plan, execute, review, in terms of literally every decision becomes part of your common sense. I don't
Mm-hmm.
actually now go through a TPER in my head when I'm thinking of either buying a stock or taking a decision in whatever company I'm involved in. It
Mm-hmm.
just comes as second nature, and it's a bit like asking the batsman, how do you decide, will you put your foot on outside the off stump if the ball is swinging out, or will you step back and try to slash it over third man? It becomes part of your nature if you just practice it daily.
Great. Great. Uh, Success. What does it mean to you? A very broad question, but how do you define success?
um, so success is, I mean, typically it's a more outward manifestation that if someone's achieved something in line with their goal and their nature. So it could be a child in third grade who has got the best marks. It could be a cricketer who has achieved the century in the match in which India really needed to win. It could be a politician winning the election which he or she really needed to win. So that's the outward manifestation of when you're kind of in sync with whatever you're doing, of what is your kind of yardstick or your goal, and is it in sync with kind of your swadharma. I don't think if, for example, if I were to go out and play cricket and score 50 runs, no one's going to think of me as successful because that's not my field or that's not my goal. If you know what I mean, it will make me very happy, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to make me successful. If you know what I mean. So success, in a sense, is uh, it's a kind of goal achievement and excellence in your chosen field. But to me personally, the true measure of success is for someone who can change the field and change
Mm-hmm.
the game. So they're not playing a game which someone else has scripted. And in our own field, why do we all admire Warren Buffett? Because he changed the rules of the game. He makes
Mm-hmm.
money on the left side and the right side of the balance sheet with creating that liability franchise with insurance at zero
Mm-hmm.
cost and having a deployment skill which is ahead of everyone else. Or the way the great entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, we can do valuations and hype aside, but what they are creating is changing the rules of the game. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, that's really, can you go to a certain level and then kind of change the rules in your chosen field? So
Right.
maybe that's helpful.
Right. Sure. So one from one pursuit to another, success is something that we pursue, right? And you said it's more of an outward thing, right? Happiness.
I
What does
not
happiness mean
pursue
to you?
again. I'll say if you pursue it thinking
Yeah.
this is the,
Yeah.
you won't get there. It if it's part of your nature, you will enjoy it.
That's right.
I
That's
don't
right.
think Elon Musk or Steve Jobs were saying I want to make Apple a $3 trillion company, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore I will do this, or I want to have like this product coming out. It's the journey of creation which is enjoyable, and
Mm-hmm.
that may lead to success. It may not, but at least you'll have satisfaction that I did my best. So I don't think chasing success is helpful to have as a mindset at all.
Right.
But
Right.
chasing
So probably
excellence
that
for sure.
that I think that answers this next question as well. What does happiness mean to you? Actually, so you're not pursuing happiness. You're not chasing happiness.
Yeah,
I think that is what you
yeah.
mean. You
See,
just be happy, right?
look, happiness is easy. When your reality is better than your expectation, that is
Uh
happiness.
huh. Uh huh.
So if I go out thinking I'm really a crack, a pretty stupid batsman, and I made 50 runs, my expectation was maybe if I last one over, I'm going
Uh
to be
huh.
happy because my expectation was so low. So the problem is we put so much pressure of expectation on ourselves or our children or whatever. That's why you're in that state of unhappiness. But if you can, like you say, get to that stage of equanimity where you say, actually, nothing is permanent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm happy, he's going to go. your expectation level is going to go to a level which basically is going to be zero, and you will be
Mm-hmm.
enjoying the moment. So whether I'm singing a song or I'm playing cricket or reading a book, you can be happy in that moment, because this too shall pass, right? And those sensations which we learn in Vipassana, when Guruji says anicca, anicca, he's basically saying it's impermanent. This too will pass. And the sensation you're feeling with your body saying, I like this sound, or I like this taste, or I like this sight of something, is a sensation which the body is giving you. That sensation is not happiness. It's the state of
Mm-hmm.
mind, that equanimity, that bliss, which is your
Mm-hmm.
happiness. Because you could be unhappy thinking about the past or worrying about the future. That's not
Mm-hmm.
reality. So
Right.
reality is here and now, and you can be, I mean, happy. There's nothing stopping you. It's
Right.
you.
Right.
That's your inner scorecard.
That's true. That's true. You've talked about Vipassana practicing, and like, for how many years have you been practicing Vipassana
So
now?
I did my first course in 2000, and
Okay.
I must admit I'm not very regular, and I wish I could be a lot more. But whatever I do and whenever I do, it just is just it's something you can experience. You can't really talk about it, because
Mm-hmm.
in a sense it's kind of removing all the layers from your body, mind, spirit, whatever, and just making it purer and purer and purer, so you can literally examine, where is this memory from, where is this aspiration from, where is this thought kind of originating, and why, what is the trigger for this. And if you can keep kind of removing that, as they very well said in the Upanishad, if I hope I remember it right from the Brihadranyaka, they say, above the senses, the five senses, above that is the mind, above the mind is the ego, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
above the mind is the intellect, which is then processing what the mind gets. Beyond the mind is the ego. Above that ego is really your unmanifested cause, what I call the swadharma, the purpose for which you are here. And
Mm-hmm.
when you can transcend that, beyond that is Brahman, where you become kind of one with the universe, and you see everything as connected. And
Mm-hmm.
you get flashes, very very far from the goal, and the practice is the enjoyment. That if you see now spirituality and technology coming together, when you say there's a world wide web, AI can run everything, is this not reflective of, like you saw in the movie called The Matrix, the gamification of the world? And
Mm-hmm.
maybe we are living in a matrix, and what we call the energy source or God has gamified, and we are living in this AI world, and playing our small roles, thinking there's this larger script and I can kind of beat the program. You
Mm-hmm.
are one tiny speck in one tiny city, in one tiny country, in one tiny world, in one massive universe. So
Mm-hmm.
it just gives you perspective in that.
Great. Talking about your achievements, so you've achieved a lot in life, right? And I'm sure, like, people who've achieved so many things in life, spanning like almost 3 decades, 4 decades, I'm sure you must have sacrificed a lot as well, like, to become what you are today. So after having seen life's ups and downs over so many years, over the past several decades, what, according to, I'm sure I think you've answered this question somewhere in the session earlier, but just to uh, 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 close this, what, according to you, after so many years of experience, is the meaning and purpose of life?
So I don't, like you use the word sacrifice. I don't think you ever think of that in that way, because your life is
Mm-hmm.
evolution, right? You are
Mm-hmm.
going to. It's like when the raindrop falls, and then it becomes part of the river, and the river goes to the sea, and then the sea gives up steam and it becomes the cloud and it comes back. It is a cycle, right?
Right.
And how are we part of this grander cycle of life is really the purpose and the journey of discovery that we have. And if you tell the drop of water, my God, you had such a long journey, you've come through the Himalayan plains to the Bay of Bengal to join with the sea.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a journey, it's part of your evolution and part of your kind of journey which was meant to be. And you have
Mm-hmm.
choices along the way. Do I take this track, or do I take that track? Do I end up in Arabian Sea or Indian Ocean? But you're going to end up in the sea one way or the other. And it's
Mm-hmm.
part of kind of nature's design. And if you think
Mm-hmm.
of it also, the way we are designed, it's so beautiful that the first kind of 20 years of your life, you're only thinking about you, I, me, myself, and your learning and your growth and your education and so on. Then you find your partner, and suddenly, you start transferring your thoughts to that person. Then you have children, and my gosh, it's suddenly multiplied. Then it multiplies into your organization, then it multiplies into your society, then it multiplies into your country, then it multiplies into your world, then it multiplies into your universe. And that's the nature of the way God designed us to evolve, to get closer and closer and closer to what I call the sea. And you realize by and by that you are in that, in the same metaphor I used of the gamification of the world. You are the wire which is conducting the electricity which is there in the world. We say
Mm-hmm.
solar power, but we are also solar powered in a sense, as
Yeah.
part of this circle of life. And you have to be the flow. As long as you're in sync with that flow of the nature in which we are living, and we don't try to be this bubble, or we try to become this tree which grows counter to nature, or try to swim upstream, you'll be
Mm-hmm.
fine. And
Mm-hmm.
reality is, money, fame, power are taking you in the opposite direction to becoming part of this flow. So, like
Mm-hmm.
I said, you need enough, but that's not the purpose of life. The purpose of life is somewhere else. And you can't be thinking, I'm immortal, I'm going to play God. I think the easiest metaphor to think is, the cloud, the drop, the river, the ocean, and then back to the cloud. And that's really your Swadharma.
Wonderful. A hypothetical question now. So, imagine you are going to lose your memory tomorrow morning, right? So, if you were to write a letter to yourself today, right, what would you write in that letter so that you can start afresh uh, the next day?
Hmm. I don't know. I never thought of that. um, well, honestly, a lot of the things we spoke of today, I don't know how long the letter is allowed, because nowadays you only write 140 character SMSs.
Right, right,
But if you could, it would be to actually find this journey and purpose and oneness with nature.
right.
I think that's what would resonate. And everything else, once you find this resonance, I think everything else falls into place.
Mm-hmm.
If I grow up thinking I can be Dhirubhai Ambani and my nature is not, I'm going to be miserable my whole life. If I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be Sachin Tendulkar and my nature is not, I'm going to be miserable my whole life. So if I can find what I'm good at, what I enjoy, what is in sync with my nature, and then as whatever that path gives me that optionality, there is a larger path called destiny, and then there is a path which calls my choices. I could go here, I could go there. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's really the journey to kind of explore and enjoy. So be an adventurer, be curious, those kinds of things.
Great. Just to close this, three quick questions. So you can call it a rapid fire question round, right? What's a single best piece of advice you ever got in your life?
I think from my father that if you are trying to latch on to someone else's success, uh,
Uh-huh.
you will be suffering long term. So lead a life of purpose, lead a life where you have upside, not kind of get trapped into something which is predictable and just stable. And it applies in investing as well, that you want limited downside but unlimited upside. That's
Mm-hmm.
how you should be kind of thinking.
Great. What's the single worst piece of advice you ever got, which in hindsight was a bad advice?
Worst advice, I don't know, that you can afford to fix your health later. Right
Okay.
now you finish the work and get the job done, and I really regret that. I really
Yeah.
regret that.
Yeah. One quote that you live by or you think very often.
I think live by your inner scorecard. Don't worry what people will say, because you know everything passes. So what
Mm-hmm.
people think, news for a week at best.
Mm-hmm.
Live by your inner scorecard, and with the notion of this too shall pass, and keep you relaxed and happy.
Wonderful. So that's all from my side, Manish. Thank you so
Great.
much for spending your time, your precious time with us, sharing your insights, your lifelong wisdom, right? And especially the concept of finding your swadharma or having your swadharma or living by your swadharma. I think that was one
There
big
is
idea that I
actually,
take it.
if I could, sorry, it's a 5 rupee book.
Okay.
Acharya Vinoba Bhave, he
Okay.
gave talks on the Gita when they were in Yerwada jail, when they were
Okay.
put in there. And he gave an extempore talk on the Gita. And he describes this concept of Swadharma really, really well.
Uh-huh.
It just comes from the publishing house which publishes all of Gandhiji's books.
Right,
So
right,
I've
right.
read different versions of Gita, but this one I found you could just feel the electricity when he must have been delivering that talk, and
Okay.
how it was captured there. So, if 5 rupees, best buy.
Great.
The second, of course, is Sketchbook of Wisdom.
Oh yeah. I'm honored, deeply honored.
I should hold it
Thank you
up.
so much.
Let's hold it up
Thank you
for
so
your
much.
plug. Great book.
Thank you
You
so
must
much,
read
Manish.
it.
I'm deeply honored by this gesture of yours. So thanks, Manish,
Thanks,
for
Vishal.
again for taking your time, and I look forward to connecting with you. And I'm
Lovely.
sure there are a great amount of insights that listeners are going to get from this. And again, to really talk about it, I've started uh, this 1% podcast with by setting high amount of expectations for people, given that you've been doing you've done the first session. So thank you so much for
Great.
all you've
Thanks for
done
having
for
me, and
me.
great service you're doing to everyone. So keep it up, and
Thank you so much, Manish.
glad to be of any help that you need. All the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks.